You have no concept of what that might be. You think maybe you're bad in bed or something. But as she did the work on herself and I did the work on myself, she unlocked a bunch of traumas around sex and how she'd been treated with sex as she grew up, which she resolved. And she's been very public about this. This is why I can share it. And I did a bunch of work on myself and how to deal with how I communicate when someone brings me such a thing. And after a year of her working on that and a year of me working on myself, we found ourselves in a place where it turns out she loves sex now. She's arguably even more sexual than I am in many respects. Completely different individual, but it just required, and I have to give the ending there because people are going to be wondering, but it required a lot of work on me and myself and where I've come from and the situation of my family and her and the experience she's been through. And we found ourselves together now in a great place. One that still requires work, but in a great place. So, everyone's struggling with some shit. My family's not great. We're not that close. I'm not that close to certain members of my family. I've struggled with romantic relationships, made all the mistakes. I struggle with platonic relationships with my friends. I'm not the guy that's able to check in. I like being alone. It is what it is. We're all, uniquely challenged in some way. So I've got a great amount of empathy for what you shared, and I really appreciate you for sharing it because there's so many people that can relate in various ways. I'm one of them. And I think it's important because we don't talk about it enough.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience and for giving me the opportunity to share a bit. The conversation started around, hard circumstances, and, it's about taking stock of where we trust ourselves to make the right decisions, where we need work. And yeah, relationships are hard, but I do think that, well, certainly now I'm feeling more ease, more seamlessness with them. Certainly with friendships, as I mentioned, we all have these areas of proficiency where we are, where we find that things are kind of easier or even easy for us. They just kind of happen, direct relationship between effort and outcome, right? And then these other areas where we feel like we're rolling a boulder uphill, keeps coming back and crushing us and we keep doing it. And I think that, there's no simple or universal answer. But, I think the rewards that come from a relationship where there's been a lot of hard work and things get resolved, even in one little domain, are so tremendous. I think that's really related to this sense that, like, when things end, it's just feels so devastating. I really believe that things can be talked through. I really do. I think that resent and anger, they don't serve anyone. They really don't. And people are probably hearing this and saying, well, that's a self-serving narrative. But really, I'm talking about in myself too. I don't carry any resent and any anger. I sometimes wish people had made different choices. But ultimately, like, we can't control what anyone else is going to do or say or think. And that's terrifying, right? People can really hurt us, right? They can really hurt us. And we would love to create a world in which we're completely safe. But I think that a lot of the work I've been doing lately is really around, kind of like touching back into maybe a younger version of myself that wasn't so walled up, wasn't so focused on what's going to happen in 2 or 3 iterations of something, just really being as present as possible, really focusing, as it's probably become clear today a few times, on like the amazing gifts that I have in my life right now. That pursuing goals is great and wanting things is great. Certainly there are things I want and want to build, mostly in the domain of relationships and family, but also just like really savoring like having one's health or having the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation like this. Like what an extraordinary life we each have if we really pay attention to some of these gifts. I used to think that if we paid attention to those gifts and focused too much on gratitude, that it would make us complacent. But all the data, of course, and my own experience as I do this more and more really emphasize how all it does is give us more energy, more anticipation of what's possible and the great things to come. And, it can all start to sound a little cliche, like just be happy with what you got. There's no just in that statement. I'm saying be happy with the things you've got. And from that state, new things emerge, more energy comes, and you can start to really navigate forward, not just sit complacently and like stop there. I think it's our essence as biological beings and psychological beings and, if you will, spiritual beings, if that's your leaning to want to want more. I think that's normal, but we have to savor what we have also. And I think once we savor what we have more energy to want more. And that's the perfect circle that just is, I guess it's more of an upward spiral. And here I'm sounding very abstract, but I could easily and, exhaustively put everyone to sleep with long mechanistic descriptions of how research on motivation or dopamine or any number of different neural systems or physiological systems support all of that. I think the most important thing is that people are honest with themselves about what they can reasonably work on right now, and to be, gentle with themselves enough to coax themselves forward, but occasionally scruff yourself and be like, it's time, it's time. And I don't know, it's certainly been an interesting life thus far. I'm still navigating, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but as I learn, I try and share what I do learn.
What has helped you on that journey? That journey to really because the way I heard it is you're someone that's orientated towards pursuing your goals and you're very, very driven in that regard, but you're kind of having to kind of, maybe this is not the right word, but kind of unlearn a natural disposition and shift more towards another state. You talked about therapy there. What has helped?
Well, I think, I was forced into therapy as a way to get out of lockup. I had to stay in high school. I had to go routinely. And so I did. I think it can be very helpful provided there's good rapport, support, and the person offers insight that lends itself to action, right? It's not just about finding someone to support and listen. Someone has to inspire action that makes you a better person, okay? And that's really important. So we're not just talking about playing with your problems, a story fondling as it's sometimes called. I think one has to understand that there's a relationship between physiology and emotion. So if I'm waking up and I don't feel well because I didn't sleep enough, I'll do NSDR, I'll get some sunlight and I'll go exercise. And generally I feel better. But I also have learned to not mask real feelings by simply trying to shift my physiology. Just as people are starting to learn, hey, yes, there are useful medications for dealing with mental health issues, but you still have to do the work. You still have to focus on building career, building relationships, doing the work. I think one of the most useful things that I've learned, again, I'm a big fan of Martha Beck. She's triple degreed from Harvard, but she also has this mystical, spiritual side that it really brings together a lot. I asked her recently, I said, what do you do when the thinking mind is trying to analyze something, predict things, and then you also have all this feeling? Which one do you rely on? She says, the way to do this is you imagine you have your feelings in one hand and your thoughts in the other, and they're kind of in this battle. It's okay, what's going to happen next? How are they going to do this? And you go back and forth. Typically, people are texting and calling and looking and drinking and doing whatever it is to try and resolve this battle. The solution is to see that battle and to sit back into this third position that she calls the compassionate observer, where you're okay, this is both happening. These are both happening. And to sit in this third position where you realize trying to reconcile just with your thoughts or just with your emotions or settle down your emotions or settle down your thoughts is futile. To get in this third position where the acceptance of that suffering shows up and you're able to just sit with the suffering. And the moment she said sit with the suffering, I was no, I don't want that answer. But then she explained from that place of suffering, you start to drop into what are the thoughts that make you feel a little bit looser and more relaxed in your body? What are the thoughts that make you feel kind of more constricted? And you just start to use that as a bit of a navigator and start asking questions like, do I want to do this thing? Do I want to drink this coffee or not? Am I just doing it compulsively? Do I want to exercise? And it sounds very abstract, extremely woo, but the brilliance of what she does and the brilliance of that scenario is that it brings together all the neuroscience that we know. We have a thinking analytic part of the brain that does what I call DPOs, duration path outcome analysis. We also have emotional states of the brain, the limbic system, it's sometimes called, but it's a bunch of other areas too. And it doesn't know the clock or the calendar, as Paul Conti, brilliant psychiatrist, says. Feelings don't know that it's today in July 2024. It thinks you're 8 years old. The limbic system, your emotions, they don't know the clock or the calendar. It doesn't know how old you are. It just knows you and circumstances and feeling. So being able to step back from all of that is really what being a healthy human being is about. And then realizing you're suffering. In that battle, you're suffering. And when you relax that a little bit and you go, okay, I'm not going to force myself to suffer as much. Now what feels right? What feels right now for the next 5 minutes? Well, then you can navigate the next 5 minutes. Maybe it's take a nap. Maybe it's have a meal. Maybe it's do a little bit of work. Maybe it's you don't know and you just sit there. But then 5 minutes later, you're able to pick the next best choice and the next best choice. And pretty soon you're off and on your way. Because so often we get avalanched by our feelings or our thoughts, or we can't sleep. And it's just like, and people are losing their minds and they're online looking for a solution, or they use distraction, alcohol, mindless scrolling. And by the way, I love social media. I teach on social media and I learn on social media from your podcast and Joe's podcast, Lex's podcast and Tim's podcast, and on and on. So I'm not demonizing it, but mindless consumption, inebriation, numbing ourselves, or forcing ourselves to do things that are not in service to our well-being, none of that is good. What's good is being able to sit with it. And in doing that, I've started to realize that you get back to what she calls, and again, the language sounds woo, but who cares? She's the one with 3 degrees from Harvard, so call her whatever you want, is what she calls essential self, which I think refers to our own unique wiring, what really feels right to us, trusting in our own goodness, trusting that if we just navigate forward from that compassionate observer place, that we are going to be, in some cases, we need to be fierce, we need to be a warrior.